Alright, hello, my name is FIFA Game Dev. Today I am bringing you a neat little particle effect that I have been working on over the past day or so. It's nothing special, nothing crazy, but I just thought that it'd be a nice thing to share because I've just kind of saw it in another video and decided that I wanted to make it. So this is the effect. So if we just, I've got it set up so that when I click, so you can see there what it is basically is each particle that I create is both rotating in the XY plane, so say the flat monitor plane, so it's rotating that way. But if you look closely, it's actually appearing to rotate in kind of the Z direction. So it kind of gives it this weird, kind of funky 3D, semi-3D kind of thing. So this was inspired by, stuff like Paper Mario, that kind of thing. But I also just saw, I can't actually remember the video that it was part of, but it was kind of one of those juice it or lose it kind of videos that was shown somewhere in some Eastern European or Scandinavian kind of country, and they had this effect for accompanying the shots of a spaceship. If anyone can remind me what video that is, you've probably seen it. I think their particles were red. But anyway, I saw this effect and I was like, man, I actually kind of really like that, and I want to replicate it. So this is what I've got. Obviously, with the gravity and all that kind of stuff, all the speeds and the gravity and the direction and all that kind of stuff is stuff that you can alter later on. But yeah, I kind of wanted to make this effect, so I did. So I guess now I'd better show you it. And the background here is from one of my last GM48 games, because I was messing around with shaders. So it's actually a shader that's making that black and white rather than it being black and white, but that might be for another video. Anyway, so that's the effect that we want to explain to you today. So I'll just show you what exactly it requires. So pretty much you only have one object for this, so I've just called mine O-part control, so particle control. You only have a create and a step event. So when I first, just to give you a bit of background as to the code of this, when I first did it, I actually ended up with something, I'll just show you, something like this. Now, it may be a little bit hard to see in this GIF because I think I recorded it at like 10 frames per second, so it's like a little bit jaggy. But you can see that all the particles are actually doing that Z direction rotation at the same time, and that did not look very good, basically. And the reason why it was doing that was because I was only creating one particle type. So what I needed to do, I kind of went through the process of trying to figure out how to do this dynamically. So creating particles, giving them an individual, and yeah, kind of every single particle that I created, having them have that scaling over their lifetime, so the scaling going from, say, 1 to -1 in the X direction, for example, having that go over the lifetime of each individual particle. Unfortunately, there's really no way to individually affect particles over their lifetime. I cannot find anywhere in the GameMaker, or really anywhere, like say Unity or anything like that, although I'm not very familiar with Unity, so that might just be my own failings. I can't really find anywhere where it actually tells you how to grab out the life, like the current lifetime, or life step, I guess, of the particle. So say if you have a particle that is alive for 30 frames, I can't find a way to grab out like which frame are you actually at in that lifetime. And I think from the GameMaker documentation and some of the blogs that have been written on this, on the particle system, I'm fairly sure that it's actually just not possible to individually affect particles like that. So instead, you have to make multiple particle systems. And that's basically what I've done here. So what I do at the start is just define the particle, the current particle choice. And I chose to start from 1 because I'm, I don't know, an idiot. I just sometimes start from 1 rather than 0. I don't know why, but there you go. So I also define, so I wanted to make this as simple as possible. Obviously you can make these into arrays if you want to. Just an array with the different timers on them if you like, and then you can use a for loop to loop through the array later on. But what I did, just to make it super simple and easy on myself, because I'm not a professional game developer, I am a hobby game developer, I am the FIFA game dev, so this is the simplicity is key for me because I like keeping things readable. I've also defined a bunch of the individual properties of each particle system, particle type, just so that rather than having to copy out when I make a change to one thing, like the size or the scale, size or the speed or the direction or the gravity, I can just update this rather than having to go through each one individually. So you've got the gravity strength, gravity direction, that's just 0.2 direction down. The minimum size of the particles, just the maximum size of the particles, that's just, pretty simple explanatory. Color 1, 2, and 3, these are output from a piece of software called Particle Designer. I'm not actually sure what these numbers mean because they're not RGB or hex or anything. I think it's just they just correspond to a color. I don't know what it actually is, but I'm sure someone could figure it out. It's probably, if you look at it here, that's maybe, I don't know, 16, 7, yeah. I really don't know, to be honest with you, but I'm sure someone could tell me in the comments if they like. And yeah, min direction, max direction, that's just where the particles fire out, and obviously speed, min, max speed. So what I do is I create 6 different particle systems. This is an arbitrary number. I could have chosen 10, I could have chosen 20. It's basically how many particles, how many different rotations do you think it takes before people stop noticing, this kind of thing? So how many different particles do you need to be rotating at different speeds and at different times before people fail to notice that there is only 6 particles, 6 rotation speeds, I guess, if that makes sense. Rotation in the Z direction, and I guess in the XY direction, if that makes any sense. So I chose 6. You can choose, you can see whether or not people notice it at 3 or 4 or 5. It's up to you. But they definitely notice it at 1, and I could definitely notice it at 2. So maybe 3 and above is the kind of the sweet spot. Anyway, ignore there's a little commented out particle type color 3 here. I initially had it going from pink to white to yellow, but I decided to go just from pink to yellow. So that's it. That's it for the create event. We're pretty much creating 6 different particle types. Particle shape is square. The size, the scale, the size is defined by the parameters. Scale I just set to 1 at the moment. I'll be changing that in the step. Color, alpha, these are all pretty generic things. Orientation, I want it to be going from 0 to 359, so spinning in the anti-clockwise direction at a speed of 5. I could also define those as well if I wanted to muck around with them. Alright, so the step event is where all the magic happens. So basically what I have is the 6 different timers stepping up. Now, as I said before, you could put the timers into an array and then just do a for loop through the array, just increasing each timer value in the array if you wanted to. So timer, open square bracket, close bracket, 6 or whatever it is, and then just go through and for loop through those ones. But like I said, I wanted to make it as simple as possible, and this makes it a lot easier to explain on YouTube. So we've got 6 timers that are just stepping up one at a time. So every frame, you're increasing them by 1. That's what that plus means. Then, if the mouse button is clicked and held down, what we have is a choice here. So in the case of 1, you are creating a particle of type hit part 1. So if we go back, if we just put this over here and keep this up there. So if the case is 1, which it will be to start with because I've got particle choice 1 up here. If the case is 1, then it creates a particle of type hit part 1, which is this one, in particle sys, which is just my particle system. You have to create a particle system in order to have particles. So that's that. And then, so it'll see, so as it stands now, it'll see that it's 1, it'll create that particle, and then it'll break, so it'll jump out of that switch. It'll jump out of that switch, but then it'll still just increase the particle choice number by 1. So that next time this runs, so next step, step 2, it'll actually go through and it'll go, the mouse button is still held down, case 2. So create this particle, so it'll do hit particle 2. Now, what I do is I make it so that for each different particle that has been created, I check what the timer is. So actually, I'll just enter these out. So these are all pretty much the same. There's no difference between each of these, so we could just delete that and just show you, just focus on this. So for the particle type scale, I scale it based on its individual timer. So this particle has its own individual timer, and what I do is I base the scale on that timer. So let's just go here. So if you look there, you've got the little help thing down the bottom. So what I have is the indice. So that's the particle type, which is hit part 1. You have the X scale, which is the thing that I'm scaling over time. And then you have the Y scale. So I want to keep the Y scale at 1. Otherwise, if I also mucked around with that in the over time, it would kind of look weird. You might get like little tiny particles that look kind of strange. I don't think it would really work. So instead, what I do is I say that it's going to be 1, the scale is going to be 1 minus the timer times 1 on 30, and what that does is it goes, okay, so let's step it through, right? So say the timer is at 0, right? So 1 minus 0 times 1 on 30. Well, obviously that's going to be 0. So sorry, it's going to be 1. So 1 minus 0 is 1. If the timer is at 30, you go 1 minus timer 1 times 1 on 30. So 1 minus 30 times 1 on 30. And what's that? That's 1. So 1 minus 1 is 0. And then if the timer is at 60, then it's 1 minus timer 1, which is 60, times 1 on 30. So 60 on 30, which is 2. So 1 minus 2 is minus 1. So what it does is that it cycles through from 1 to minus 1, and minus 1 is just the image flipped. So with a square, it just looks like a square again. There's no actual difference. But what it does is it just means that it's a smooth rotation over time. Because then what happens is that if the timer is greater than 60, then I flip it back to 0. So basically it'll just continually spin until it disappears off the screen, I guess. So what we can do is that is for particle 1. And so for every particle 1 that is created, it will be on the same timer, if that makes any sense. So what happens is, so say that I've held down the mouse button for 7 frames, right? So what I've done is I've gone through case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4, case 5, case 6. So I've got 6 different particles that have appeared on the screen, and they're all rotating differently, so they look really pretty. Now on frame 7, I create another particle that is hit part 1, because we've gone back to case 1. Because if part choice is greater than 6, we go back to 1. And that's the case for the switch. So both the first particle that was created in step 1 and the 7th particle, which was created in step 7, are part of the same system. So they will actually have the same scale at any one time. So you see what I mean about wanting to avoid this situation, whereby every single particle is on the same timer and its scale is getting affected at the same time. When you have 6 particles on the screen, as you can see, when I run the program, it's very difficult to tell that there's only 6 particles, that are like there's only 6 different spins. Like I can't tell that from looking at those. I would guess that if I was to look at that without knowing what I've programmed, I would guess that they're all on their own individual spin in that Z direction. So that's kind of how I do it. There's not that much else to explain. As I said, you can muck around with different speeds, gravities, all that kind of stuff. You can do different things over time. You could use this timer to change the color, for example. So you could have kind of looping color schemes over time for each particle if you wanted to. You could do all sorts of things over time using the timer. But I just thought that was an interesting way of getting that kind of effect, that particle effect, and it seems to work pretty well. No real slowdown. I did have some help from Yukisho on the GameMaker subreddit. He was interested in trying to script this. We did try that, but unfortunately, well, he did try it. I'm not particularly great with scripts. He did try that, but unfortunately, it just didn't quite work because if you're scripting this, then you're creating a particle type every single step. So rather than 6 particle types, you'd have as many particles as you have. That's how many particle types you have. And then trying to individually affect those over time doesn't really work. So yeah, it's an interesting problem to have that you can't, say for example, directly affect the. I guess you could add it to an. Anyway, we ran into problems with it. This is a kind of a hack way of doing it, but it seems to work. So yeah, that's the video. Yeah, I guess any questions, please leave them in the comments. I don't update that regularly, so maybe don't subscribe, I don't really care. This is pretty much a channel for me to show off little things that I've found out, and maybe to promote a game sometime in the future. Who knows? But yeah, that is kind of Z-axis spinning particles. I don't know if there's any better way to name them. Maybe leave that in the comments as well. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.